that what you're taking? Is this yours?
No. Someone's going to put it.
Huh?
I'm putting all our bags.
Yeah. Let's not keep it in
In-person PC meeting.
Howdy, yeah, I know. I think you maybe question why you didn't see that.
In the spirit of how talks work at kindness.
Okay.
I know. Read my response.
I did look at my.
Okay, great, no Slido, that makes my life easier. Slido doesn't work. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. I know it's always tempting in fun Chi locations to see the town, so we are excited and we will make this worth your while. So just make sure you're in the right room. This is the Chi Academy panel. So if you're not familiar with the Chi Academy, it is an award from ACM SIGCHI that every year elects about 8 to 12 members that represent senior members of our field who have made substantial contributions to advancing the field of HCI itself. And so this year, we're very excited to have 11 new inductees in the Chi Academy, and this is our opportunity to learn from their collective knowledge. So the way this is going to work, since we have such a large panel, I have to admit, it's the largest panel I've ever had the pleasure to moderate. What we're going to do is first we'll do some quick introductions so that you all can get a quick overview of who all is new in the Chi Academy this year. And then I have some questions that I've prepared. They're going to be questions that are targeted to particular panelists because we don't want 11 people going down the line answering the same question. That wouldn't be very exciting. And then we're going to save at least half the session for Q&A from the audience. There was supposed to be a Slido, but the link they sent me for the Slido for this session didn't work right. So we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way, where in the second half we'll bring the lights up, you'll raise your hands, and the student volunteers will bring microphones. So first, the quick introductions. I'm going to set the example for the introduction pace. I am your moderator today, Chi Academy class of 2020, so I never got to be on a panel like this because of the pandemic. My name is Meredith Ringel Morris. I'm a research scientist at Google DeepMind, and when I was inducted into the Chi Academy, it was for my contributions to accessible computing research, social computing and information retrieval, and human-AI interaction. And now, in alphabetical order, each of our panelists will briefly introduce their name, their affiliation, and a few keywords about what got them into the Chi Academy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Bigham. So I am an associate professor at Carnegie Mellon University in the Human-Computer Interaction Institute. I'm also the director of Human-Centered Machine Learning Responsible AI at Apple. My keywords are accessibility, human-AI interaction, and crowdsourcing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Dabbish. I'm a faculty member also in the Human-Computer Interaction Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. My key contributions have been in understanding the social and organizational dynamics of online work, so things like social transparency, digital labor, open source software, and human AI systems.
Hi, everyone. I'm Darren Gergle. I'm at Northwestern University. And my work really examines how people collaborate, communicate, and build shared understanding through technology. And my contributions were primarily kind of spanning the areas of collaboration technologies, online communities, and more recently, the design of inclusive collaborative systems.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Niklas Elmqvist. I'm a professor of computer science at Aarhus University in Denmark. And my research is in data visualization and obviously human-computer interaction at the intersection of these two, including things like augmented reality, human-AI interaction, and so forth. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Kori Inkpen. I'm a professor of computer science at Aarhus University. I'm also the head of department of computer science. And my keywords are participatory design, hypermedia, interactive spaces, and extended reality.
Hello everyone, Chris Harrison, Carnegie Mellon University. My keywords are enabling technologies, sensors, machine learning, wearables, augmented reality. New features, things you haven't done with your devices yet.
Hi everyone, I'm Kori Inkpen. I'm a partner research manager at Microsoft, and I lead the Future Experiences team, which is HCI and human-centered AI. My keywords would be CSCW, child-computer interaction, video conferencing, telepresence.
I'm scared to move this mic. Is it working? Yes. I'm Catherine Isbister. I'm from the University of California, Santa Cruz. And I do work at the intersection of games and play in HCI. I do designerly work, and we focused that work over the years on things like emotion and emotion regulation, XR, as well as more recently, the challenge of climate resilience.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ola Kristensson, and I'm a professor of interactive systems engineering in the Department of Engineering at the University of Cambridge. And I have been working on interactive AI for a very long time now, and done various contributions there.
Hello, my name is Joseph Laviola. I'm a professor at the University of Central Florida. My areas of interest include 3D user interfaces for virtual reality and augmented reality, as well as sketch-based and touch-based interfaces specifically related to STEM education.
First of all, it's an honor to be here, to be among all these people. I'm Eric Paulos. I'm a computer scientist, an artist, an engineer, designer. I'm at UC Berkeley, and I've had contributions across robotics and telepresence, citizen science, critical making, wearables unmaking, and I like to build physical interactive artifacts that advance science, society, and critique our culture.
Excellent. And Eric, we'll pick on you first. So if you were entering HCI today as a young researcher, what would you run towards and what would you actively resist?
Great. Great question. I would encourage students to be intellectually promiscuous. I would ask them to try to look at radical new methods and materials. I would think that they should go to the kind of unruly, messy parts of our research space where it's a little bit uncomfortable to be. I also would encourage them to basically be uncomfortable with the kind of work that they do. And I think in terms of what I tell them to resist, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would resist this idea to be kind of overly narrowing what you do. And I know you're at Chi and there's lots of names and keywords and session titles, but those are Chi today. And in fact, your job, your role, is really to go and to create radically new domains and spheres of influence. I would encourage you to not fall into the trap of thinking that HCI is just to make things work better. It's also to question and have research taste in what matters and why and for whom, and who is also maybe not at the table unaffected. I would challenge you to do those kinds of things. I would ask mainly not simply what the client can afford or what the conference can afford or what your employer can afford, but what the planet can afford.
Thank you. And we'll go to the other end of the table and pick on Jeff Bigham. So Jeff, a lot of superintelligence labs seem to think that interaction in general and accessibility in particular are going to be solved if we just post-train the right models enough. So what, if anything, do you think these folks are missing?
Well, that's a great question, Mary, and I've never heard it before. But off the top of my head, here's my 12-point response detailing my perspective. No. So Mary and I do talk a lot about HCI and how kind of the AI, the burgeoning, very rapidly growing AI field kind of thinks about HCI, especially being in some of the big AI labs. And I do think there's this notion, and it's expressed in different ways, that maybe we don't need HCI because we've gotten pretty far. You look at these models, the success of these models. How directly can you tie back the success of those models to HCI research? And I think there's some truth to post-training, so that step of training your large models for whatever tasks that you care about. It has been pretty successful, and it works a lot at the kinds of things that HCI researchers have cared about, especially at a scale. But I think there's three, so I don't have 12, I don't have time for 12. I have three big things that I think HCI research can say about that. Actually, one of them builds off of Eric's point. So somebody has to decide what we care about and our perspective on things. What does it mean for a model to do well? That's a very human-centered concern. All of those are human-centered concerns. And so we need to be able to make decisions, and people need to be involved, I believe, in that loop. The second thing we're learning a lot is that architectures matter a lot. So how are these models getting embedded in other technical systems? And so systems-oriented HCI work, I mean, that's clearly part of the bread and butter of Chi. And so I think that's really, really powerful and important. And then I think the third thing, which I think is really coming clear now, is we need to understand and create, document, develop new ways for people to use AI systems. And so it's not just that there's one interface to end them all and that we all know how to use it. And so all of the things about how people learn how to use AI, how they kind of change how we use it. So I've recently gotten really excited about this. There's this post by Karpathy who talks about how you can kind of create a context in a folder and then have Claude Code help you with all kinds of things. Like, you know, I've been embedding different processes that we use at work in this sort of thing. Like, that's a very human-centered process, human-centered with technology. And so that's right at the bread and butter of Chi. And so I don't know that they think that, but if they do think that, I think they're wrong, and HCI has a lot to contribute going forward.
Next, Chris Harrison. In the age of generative AI, what do you think the future of HCI publishing looks like? Do you think papers are still relevant? What's it going to mean to put a lot of effort into writing a paper if the consumer of that paper is just going to ask an AI agent to summarize it for them?
Yeah, it's a big question for our time. I think my hope is that it means that we're going to focus less on the crafting and fighting with overleaf and more on ideas. I think, to me, I think AI is going to remix all of our papers. I think the notion of the paper and producing the PDF is it's going to be very kind of retro very soon, because people will change that into an audiobook, into a podcast, into a short version, into a long version, you know, and so I think kind of the template wars are officially over, and it should really be about the content of the paper. And it's sort of the craftsmanship that we put into our papers right now feels a little bit like, you know, learning calligraphy in the age of the internet or something. Not that there's not a skill component to it, but I think we want to allocate our time really crafting the best ideas and the best studies and the best science, and the format itself is not so important. With respect to just sort of the explosion of papers, this is another thing that I think is not easily rectified. I think it's fantastic that we're drawing more people into the field, especially people that aren't native English speakers. Obviously, there's a clear bias there. So I don't know, I think it's actually pretty positive. We need to find a way to avoid the tsunami of papers with better reviewing, but I actually think that the growth is really great for HCI.
Thank you. Joe Laviola, you have done a lot of work in virtual and augmented reality. Meta seems to have given up on the idea of the metaverse. They recently laid off many of their reality lab researchers. As an expert in this area, what do you think that this reaction from industry means about the likely path and time to impact for virtual reality research?
Well, I guess I would say that, you know, it is somewhat unfortunate that Meta did lay off that many people. But I would also say that, you know, they probably had a lot of people to start with, given that, you know, they were really sort of trying to achieve massive amounts of employees to focus on VR and AR. And, you know, with the AI hype train has kind of taken over the media cycles, and the VR AR hype train has kind of slowed down a little bit, which is to be expected. It happens. If you look over the years, you'll see different waves of technology come and go, and they introduce themselves at later times. And I'm sure that that VR and AR will have some new breakthrough at some point and reintroduce itself, and it will be bigger and better than ever. But for right now, I still think the community is strong. You know, between VR and ISMAR, there's about close to 2,000 papers that get submitted every year. And I come from a time when the VR conference had 100 papers submitted. So it's grown quite dramatically over the years. And as far as, you know, Meta and what they're doing, they're still promoting their AI glasses, with their collaboration with Ray-Ban. And these glasses are going to support both, you know, AI and AR, and they literally are the size of a regular pair of glasses. So the form factor is so much better, and I think we're going to see more and more people use those, and then there'll be more and more research in that area.
Thank you. Niklas, you've had faculty positions in both the United States and the European Union. How is HCI research and academia different in Europe than in North America? And what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of each continent's approach to this area?
Yeah, I mean, to give some context, I spent 15 years in the States after a postdoc in Europe. I did my PhD in Europe, and then I came back, and I've been at Aarhus in Denmark for the last 2.5 years. And I mean, there are certainly big changes, differences. The funding landscape in both places really govern the way the different academic cultures work. If I would say one thing is that to characterize the two is that it would be that the US and North American system perhaps, or the US system at least, where I have direct experience of, gets people into situations that are fairly challenging. You get a lot of art resources, but also a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure in my experience. Whereas the European model is a little more nurturing, where you start out as an assistant professor, you're part of a team. You can't even advise students directly in many systems. You have to become get habilitation or similar, which is both good and bad. Like the US system, I think, is like, coal under pressure creates diamonds. That is perhaps one way to look at it. It could also lead to some people dropping out or getting difficult, mental health challenges and so on. So I think that both systems have their strengths and weaknesses. The funding landscape has made a lot of impact. I am pleased that I've spent those 15 years in the States, and I'm also pleased to be back in Europe.
Catherine, what would you say to someone who thinks that games and play are marginal or perhaps even frivolous concerns for our research community to spend time on?
Yeah, so over the years, I think at one point, games sort of go through these peaks and troughs, and right now we're having dark patterns conversations about games, but those dark patterns exist everywhere. So a couple of things that I often say about my area. One is that games have often actually led the vanguard in how new interaction techniques are going to actually be broadly disseminated, because you won't play a game with some gimmicky new interface unless that experience feels really good. So you can think of games as taking interesting new interaction techniques and giving them a trial by fire, right? The other thing that's wonderful about games, and it's tied to the same thing, is that people don't have to use them. You will put up with a lot of crappy interaction in a task-based interface. If it's a leisure experience, you will simply put it down. And so that also means there's been some incredible innovation among game designers that I think we're still learning from and still kind of struggling to implement in these paradigms that we've created for ourselves in more task-based HCI. And so those are kind of the two things. The other thing that I think is interesting is how huge of an economic driver games and play are. And we've had different waves in HCI and started talking about how computation has kind of crept into all areas of our lives. But I think, again, game designers have a really, really sophisticated practice in helping people have really lovely felt experiences in the moment that we can still learn a lot from. And a gap there is they don't often write about their work. You have to go to conferences like the Game Developer Conference. So if you're curious about all those things, you could try out the Game Developers Vault, which has a lot of free talks from really, really amazing game designers about all of these kinds of principles. And I encourage you all to go check it out.
Darren, your early work focused on how people build shared understanding when they're interacting through technology. What did you find you got wrong, and how has your thinking about computer-mediated communication changed or evolved?
Well, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to admit in public that I've gotten something wrong. It's been a lot of therapy to get there. But no, I think actually when you think about wrong, just reflecting on that as an idea is pretty interesting from the perspective of us as HCI researchers. I would say, in some of the early work, it was incomplete, and maybe from a scientific and a knowledge production standpoint, incomplete is okay. But when we start to think about the application of that to the design of technologies and the downstream impacts and effects that it has, now incomplete is wrong. It often brings in biases. It builds in a lot of challenges that we didn't necessarily expect. So in my my early work, I focused a lot on these features of communication systems like shared visual space and how it shapes people's kind of ability to establish shared understanding. And part of that work at the time was pushing against beyond like purely language-based models that did that. And I was bringing in ideas of multimodality and embodiment, how gesture, gaze, and visual attention sort of contribute to our coordination and our development of shared understanding. But I think what I really missed was I treated that as kind of a key layer to optimize, and rather than it being one of many important layers. And so shared understanding isn't something that you can really just engineer in an interface alone. I think it's really it's deeply shaped by who the participants are, the context that they're in, the broader social and cultural dynamics that they operate around. And a big part of my shift in thinking there, I also, I would urge you all to sort of get out of your comfort zones and engage with others. A big part of the shift in my thinking really came from working with all the incredible students, colleagues, and other community members that I've had the privilege to work with over the years. And so they've continually sort of broadened how I think about these problems and surfaced perspectives that I wouldn't have seen on my own. They've pushed me to think about more sort of inclusive perspectives that are grounded in real world settings in ways that I hadn't really considered in some early kind of experimental work that I was doing. And so I think it really speaks to sort of like the value of both engaging with these broader communities and using that to sort of reflect on how you might change your thinking over time.
Ola, do you think that there is a theory crisis in HCI? And what do you think the role of theory in HCI is in this new era of pervasive AI?
So I used to be pretty cynical about this when I was younger, because I remember a discussion many years ago at CHI, actually, as it turns out, and it was like, are there any theories in HCI? And people are like, I don't know, Fitts law. And I think that's a pretty common gut reaction among a lot of people, if we're going to be honest. But I find HCI may not necessarily discover many unique theories on its own, but it is a fantastic synthesizer as a field of taking really valuable theories like social determination theory, theories from human factor like automation theory, control theory even, right, which explains Fitts law in a more interesting way, and lots of other theories, and synthesizing them and presenting them in unique ways and how to apply them in ways that actually enriches the original fields that conceived the original theory to begin with. And we should be very proud of that. And we are probably not doing a good enough job of articulating the sheer plethora of theories we have. As an indication, in the recent textbook we wrote, there is an appendix, and there are a list of about 200 principles, all sourced to the textbook, from principles that are originated in HCI. So I think we should actually congratulate ourselves, actually. In some senses, we are more systematic than a lot of other disciplines, but we are not very good at articulating this fact to ourselves and to the outside world.
Laura, you built one of the first undergraduate HCI summer research programs. What did that experience teach you about how young students want to shape the future of computing?
Mary, thank you for asking about that. So just for context for everyone, for about the past 10 years, we've invited 30 to 40 undergraduate students to CMU to work with faculty and students and staff on research projects for the summer, including folks on this stage like Jeff and Chris, and folks in the audience, folks not here today. So it's really a community-based effort to give people early exposure to the field. And I'll say one thing that really stands out from working with these students is they're very motivated and attuned to the broader impacts of technology. So the kinds of experiences that they've had coming into the program and in their lives is so different than 10, 20, 30 years ago. Their family lives, their school lives have really been mediated by and shaped by technology in such a different way, and they've seen it, do incredibly bad things and incredibly good things, and so they're thinking about and facing these existential crises now that maybe we all are about what it means to be human and what really should the role of technology be, and they want to work on that. So they're interested in not just building systems for technology's sake and just because it's, to do something cool because it's fun to do, but they're asking, who do these systems affect? They're asking the kinds of questions that folks have mentioned on the stage, like who's included in these systems, who's excluded, what are the downstream consequences? That's really what's motivating many students today. So working with them has really reinforced for me how important that is, and in many ways I think they're already pushing the field in the direction it needs to go towards more sort of socially grounded and responsible computing. And for folks who might be running these programs or interested in doing a program like this, giving people that exposure to real-world problems and users early on, I think gives folks a sense of what the field can be and the potential it can have. So that's just a suggestion at the end.
Great. Kai, your early research was on participatory design, and I was wondering if there are relevant takeaways today from that research now that people can supposedly build their own personalized IT solutions using generative AI.
Definitely, and I even think that there will be a revival of participatory design research in the light of AI. We more than ever need the human in the loop, and we see exactly the same challenges with Gen AI projects as we did with traditional system development projects, that they often fail because of lack of understanding of the use context and the organizational context. So we have seen a rush to push Gen AI into all corners of organizations. But we also have seen a survey from MIT saying that more than 90% of the Gen AI projects fail to deliver a return on the investment. And we see similar reports from Danish organizations. And Denmark is a very digitalized country, so it doesn't help for the public administration, for instance, that we're very digitalized. It still fails. So the individual benefits we see from Gen AI for programming, for search, for analysis of data, they do not easily generalize and transfer to larger, complex systems where there's an organizational use context that need a deep understanding to design for. So examples of that is, of course, governmental administration, healthcare, but also many industrial decision-making situations need deep insight to design systems for. So some of the challenges that I've seen is a lack of a common understanding of what is the problem we're actually trying to solve, what is the understanding of the organization that we're designing for, and in many cases there is also a lack of the data that is actually needed to support the visions. So participatory design is a set of methods that help gain a better understanding of use domains and organizational contexts, and to create scenarios, envision future alternative solutions. And here, Gen AI actually has some potentials that it's faster and more efficient to do rapid participatory prototyping with users with these tools, but the understanding of the context you design for is the important thing. So I see many prospects in developing participatory AI methodologies on top of the classical participatory design, and this is also an endeavor that many of my colleagues are involved in today, and there's actually a parallel panel right now on participatory AI and social justice, so I think it's an area that will gain more traction.
Thank you. So Kori, I have a hard question for you because when I used to work at Microsoft Research, where you are, there was a wonderful speaker series called Failure to Lunch, where over lunch, someone very senior would talk about a failure that they had experienced at work in a very honest way and share what they learned from that. So kind of in the spirit of carrying on that MSR tradition, I was hoping you could tell everyone about a project that you have had that went awry and how you handled it and what you learned from the failure.
Thanks, Mary. And like Darren, I get to share my failures as well.
Thank you, Kori.
As any HCI researcher, particularly if you do user studies in the wild, more often than not, things do not go as planned. But we always learn from those experiences. But the one I want to share with you today was actually a piece of research that I loved. So Lana Yarosh came. She was an amazing intern with us at Microsoft Research. She did a project that looked at children augmenting their friendships over video conferencing. It was called Video Playdate. Loved the piece of research. It was great. We finished the project. CNN reached out to do a news article on this piece of research. I thought this would be a great idea. Come to find out, they ended up doing a poll, and 94% of Americans at that time, I think this was back in like 2010, thought this was a horrible idea. Kids should be playing face-to-face with their peers. They should not be using Skype or video conferencing at all. And it just made me chuckle because at that point in time, we knew that this was not intended to replace kids playing together face-to-face, but that this could augment friendships. And we saw the potential in this, and I'm sure it's no surprise to anybody in this room today that kids today use FaceTime and use all sorts of video conferencing tools to connect and build friendships and peers with others. So the moral of that story is even if your paper gets rejected or your grant gets rejected or your peers don't quite get what you are doing, if you believe in it and you can see something in it, maybe you're just ahead of the curve.
Thank you. Darren, another question for you is what you think HCI research will look like if or when it evolves to a state where the work is relying on synthetic humans like AI agents for doing user testing. If we can simulate social behavior at scale, do we still need people at all for user studies, or are people just there to validate or train the simulation and then off we go?
Mary, I'd like to pass. So I think some people worry about the Terminator. I stay up at night worrying a little bit about synthetic human testing. So I do think whether we like it or not, synthetic users they're already being used, and they're only going to grow in prominence. I think across engineering, design, marketing, kind of you name it. The promise, right, is that they let us kind of explore design spaces more quickly. We can test ideas at scale. We can simulate interactions that I think otherwise would be either too difficult or too expensive to study. I think those are reasonable things to see promise in. But I think as HCI researchers, we also know just how nuanced human behavior is and how it varies across people, across context, across different lived experiences. And I think that the risk then becomes that these simulations that are built on data and assumptions that we started with, they don't reflect sufficiently that complexity. And so I think we practically speaking then, what really kind of concerns me is that I think when we think about the impact of this work on sort of industry and development contexts, there's a real incentive, I think, right now for a lot of companies to basically go with something that's good enough, right? They're going to capture the 80% of the behavior, and then they're going to move the engineering forward. And I think, synthetic user testing, it really makes that pretty easy to do in some ways, or at least to provide a perception that you have an answer that can then guide the development forward and move it forward. And so I think the danger is that we might end up optimizing systems and designs for those assumptions that we started with, rather than discovering where those assumptions break down, which I think is what we as researchers are often trying to do. So I don't really see humans as just validating the simulations, but I see them as being essential for sort of challenging those assumptions and extending them surfacing edge cases, raising these notions of lived experiences that are unique and not represented in the data. And I think, for areas like accessibility or collaborations among kind of diverse populations, these are the gaps that really matter, and I think they're the things that we need to attend to. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do as HCI researchers to get a seat at the table and to begin to kind of engage this, because it is happening with or without us, and I think if we don't step up and start to sort of make our position kind of clear around that, I think we're going to be looking back and think that we sort of missed a major opportunity, but also have gone down a path that maybe is not what we would all want in this room.
Yeah. Catherine, could you tell us about the most interesting article or book or lecture from outside the SIGCHI community that has really influenced you or inspired you recently?
Yeah, so I thought a lot about this one. And I have to say in present times that issues of morality and one's place in a rapidly changing socio-political landscape have been heavy on my mind. So I have a couple of books if you're also feeling that way. A nonfiction book is The Persuaders, which is not new but is new to me, that came out in 2022 by Anand Giridharadas. And this is a set of case studies of people in the US who have done coalition building despite sometimes their feelings of moral repugnance about others. And the case studies are all kind of trying to drive home the message that we have to move past, if you will, our type 2 reactions. I don't know if I'm getting 1 and 2 right, but we can't just have our emotional reactions and start attacking one another. We have to calm ourselves down and coalition build with people, even if we don't always agree. And then the fiction book that I think kind of resonates with this is the recent George Saunders novel, Vigil, which is set in this kind of weird, ephemeral situation in which this kind of oil baron, who's definitely, without question, single-handedly, hugely contributed to climate change, is visited by this kind of comforting angel-type persona who is trying to walk him down the path of acknowledging this and somehow reconciling himself. And it has this incredible cast of characters of all the types of rationalizations and kind of garden paths people can wander down, and it's all wrapped in this very kind of dreamy, fanciful world, kind of like something out of Dante's Inferno, kind of the purgatorial part of that novel. So I highly recommend both those books if you've been thinking about all this as a kind of way to swim in the murky waters of being human. And as Rebecca Solnit says in her book, Hope in the Dark, thinking of hope as a verb and as something that's active and as something that means a stepping into an unknown, because often the unknown spaces, just to refer back to Eric's comment at the beginning, are where really productive activity and connection and change can happen. And so, yeah, maybe those will be helpful to others besides myself.
Thank you. And Kai, for you, the opposite question. What's a paper, a lecture, a demo from within the SIGCHI community that has most influenced you, and how?
Thank you for that question. To pick a paper within the community, but I will pick a paper from one of the other areas of my research. Rekimoto and Saitwa's Kind 99 paper on augmented surfaces and the accompanying demo has inspired me a lot, and it gave a first very impressive demonstration about how you could do seamless transfer of digital material across heterogeneous physical surfaces. For instance, with pick and drop as an analogy to cut, copy, and paste. So it has inspired our work on interactive spaces in Aarhus. In fact, I was leading a Center for Interactive Spaces research for more than 10 years. And here we developed many novel new augmented surface concepts, including shape-changing surfaces, interactive floor surfaces, and so forth. And this early paper on augmented surfaces kept inspiring still. And in fact, I started running an augmented reality course in 2002, and several of Regimoto's papers were among the mandatory readings in that course, and of course also the AR toolkit papers from Mark Billinghurst. So a lot of inspiration in that area led us to do a lot more interactive spaces, augmented reality research, and it has led to us having a very strong focus on extended reality at our labs in Aarhus. And now our extended reality research is reinforced through recruitment of several excellent international colleagues from this community here. So thanks for the contributions from the community to our work in this area.
Thanks. Great shout out to Jun Rekimoto. I hope he's in the audience. I don't know. Eric, if HCI is going to remain inventive and relevant to the world, what other fields and communities of practice do you think we should be in conversation with?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Okay, definitely, we all know there's going to be AI in this mix, so we can just clear the air on that. But one thing to be clear is, AI it's a creative tool, it's a creative material, it's a creative medium. I would also argue that, in fact, it's not how does HCI respond to AI, but I think AI really needs HCI to be truly effective. It has to have that designerly HCI touch that makes it meaningful to humans. And that's also when you're doing your own work, I think you need to use not just the lens of how does this relate to AI or is this AI? I mean, sometimes there's going to be moments to pause and stop and look through other lenses as a critique, and probably that means, from practitioner standpoint, is going and partnering with those that don't always look towards technology as the solution. So maybe that's artists, that's activists, that's maybe environmentalists, that could be maybe people in public policy or, dare I say, government. I mean, you can imagine what would happen if there was a permanent role at the United Nations for an HCI researcher or practitioner, a voice at those kind of tables, what kind of international effect that could have. And I'd also say, of course, I think we need to be edgy and, I think we need technology. We have to go deeper. I think looking at other fields, I think material science, robotics, of course, synthetic biology. There's a lot of fields that I think HCI can really partner with and really go deep on technology. I think the final thing I'd say is just be a punk. And what I mean is, if you think about any field or anything that kind of has resonance and passion and really some kind of provocative nature, it's, if it's punk artists or punk music, it's someone operating outside the bounds at the edges, and I would say, let's find the punk HCI.
Kori, in industry, AI adoption is more rapid than it might be in academia. So for example, I know at Google, engineers are expected to be using agentic coding tools. How do you suggest that today's students integrate AI tools into their workflows to build skills they'll need for their future careers?
Thanks, Mary. Yes, this is definitely the case at Microsoft. We use AI in many, many facets of the work that we do. What I would recommend is a leaning in. Take the time to learn the rapidly evolving landscape. As Darren mentioned, this is happening with or without us. The more that we can learn and understand and pair that with the inspiration and the creativity that we have as HCI researchers, we'll be able to do really amazing things. Another thing we talked about in a workshop I was in earlier today is the importance of agility in terms of what we are looking for in future researchers. We want researchers that can learn, that can adapt, that can be very agile in terms of the research that they are doing and the skills that they are building. Because we're right in the middle of this transformation. I can't tell you today what you're going to need to know for tomorrow, but if you're building strong skills on how to learn and evolve and adapt, then that should put you in a really great place.
Chris, I have another question relating to industry because you've done a lot of things in the startup world and a lot of collaborations with industry like Disney. How do you resolve the tension between industry partners or industry funders of your work that want to kind of keep things private and have trade secrets versus the foundational values in academia to publicly disseminate advances in science and engineering?
Yeah, this is a really tricky question. I deal with this more and more. I had a sponsor come visit my lab. They said, tell us all the exciting research that you're thinking about for sort of the next 1 year horizon. And that company, I'm sure, has people in this room, so I hope I don't get into too much trouble. But at the end of the meeting, they said, this is fantastic. Like, this is really exciting. And I said, well, do you think you might be able to contribute? They said, well, but why do we have to pay? Like, we'll just read the paper. It's great. We don't need to give you any money. We'll just wait until you publish the work. And they were pretty serious. They were kind of like, we don't really see the return on investment here. We'll just wait at the end of the pipeline. Why should industry be funding academic labs? That took me back. This is a prominent company. So, what I've seen at CMU in terms of contract negotiation is that a lot of the big players, like the Metas and the Googles and the Apples and so on, are moving to an open science model where actually they don't want your IP. You might think, okay, well, if we give money, then you get the patents. I have not signed a research agreement that kind of grants patent rights because they don't want it in probably 5 years now. So I feel like there's kind of these weird tidal forces where they don't, they're willing to fund, and I don't think it should be charity. I think there has to be a value that industry extracts out of it. But if they don't want sort of the IP, and the knowledge is freely disseminated, then what are they getting out of those relationships? And I think probably the best thing is really getting to kind of put their thumb on the scale of which directions are most interesting to that company, which is useful. But then again, they might get a 6-month head start on some of their competitors. So yeah, it's tricky. I don't have a great answer for this, and this is something that I've been seeing more and more in really the last half decade.
A related question for Ola, what do you think is the important work that should be happening in universities that companies either can't do or are avoiding doing?
That's a great question. I think there are an easy answer and a hard answer. The easy answer is that you can just be better at what companies are doing. That's what some of my colleagues try to do in speech recognition and these related fields like computer vision. The other easy answer is to do the complement of what industry is doing, meaning doing what they are not doing. That leads to the hard answer. So if you want to do something that they are not doing, then the question is that space is infinite, right? So there's so many things you can do, so how can you add value? This is where Eric's punk theory comes in. So you need to be a punk, but you need to be a clever punk, right? Because there's a lot of punk stuff you can do, but it's not adding any value. And the challenge is adding that value. And going back to Chris' answer there, I think a lot of companies don't realize in my interactions that the cost of not being creative is huge, right? $25,000 investment in getting somebody to just look at something can give you a completely new way of thinking about really mundane things at the surface, like machine tooling or quality assurance processes or whatever, right? And research can add a huge amount of value there, so that's one sort of answer. And the other thing is that companies operate based on returning money to shareholders, right? I mean, we have a fiduciary duty to do so. And we do not, right? So we are actually gifted with something very, very precious in the ability to spend time and effort drilling really, really deep, or going broad but synthesizing lots of different things together and coming up with something new that way. And I always tell PhD students that this is your one chance in life where you have enough time to actually do that, because you're not going to get that opportunity later in your life. And I think that's the kind of things we can contribute beyond the industry.
Jeff, another question for you that we have often debated over text message. Do you think that the machine learning folks successfully reinvented HCI? I mean, they made ChatGPT. They seem to have reinvented all the human computation, human in the loop methods, like for data enrichment and RLHF. Why does it seem like they didn't need our community?
I think I'm going to pass this to No, I appreciate what I think are straw man AI questions where I get to defeat them in front of a friendly audience. Okay, first, part of that answer, I think, is I think they did need us very straightforwardly. So it's funny to think of ChatGPT not needing us when it's built entirely on the GUI stack that is very near and dear to the HCI community's heart. And then the crowdsourcing, I don't know, I taught, maybe it wasn't useful, and maybe I am overemphasizing our community's importance in this, but I taught a crowdsourcing course for years, and many students went off into industry and took some of that knowledge with them, and you know, much of what happens in the data labeling annotation companies feels very familiar from the work that we all did collectively 10 or 15 years ago. And it's also kind of weird to think, oh, but they didn't need us, when they seem to have kind of just done the first thing that worked and clearly hired a UX person to build it, because I have met many machine learning people and they did not build the ChatGPT interface, at least not without having picked up some HCI along the way. There is an old joke in AI, you know, so once AI works, it's no longer AI and it's algorithms. I think once HCI works, it's no longer HCI, it's just kind of taken for granted. But we've never had a monopoly on interaction either. So there's always been startups that do interesting, cool new things. And you're like, oh, see, we didn't need the HCI community. And you know, there are a lot of us that do inventive things, and I think we kind of push the bounds of what's possible. Sometimes other people do too, and we welcome them into that community. And then, like Paulos said, we also build a theory, and we kind of back that up over time, like what actually means things over time. I wanted to say at least one or two controversial things, since Mary promised it would be spicy. All right, so again, it's a friendly audience, so maybe it won't be that controversial, but you know, I think there's been people who say, oh, is Kai going to go away with like AI development? And I'm going to put it out there, I think it's the opposite. If I go 20 years down the road, I think it's much less likely that NeurIPS will exist than Kai. And part of that is just tautological, because NeurIPS kind of has the mission or goal to obviate itself, right? So we're going to build machine learning that can do all of these things, whereas humans will never be solved. I don't believe it. If nothing else, there will be a human who says, we'll say, you're solved, human, and the human will say, no, I'm not. And then we have to think about that. Final thing, I know I'm over time a little bit, but I really wanted to answer this question of if you went to HCI battle with 3 former Kai Academy members, who would they be? And I think I was trying to frame that around what is the battle, and I think the battle is what so many people on this panel have already been getting at, which is how do we kind of not remain relevant, because we're totally relevant. It's more, how do we convince people, like to Darren's answer, other people's answers. And I'm not going to tell you why, but I'm going to tell you who I'm bringing to that battle. That's who I picked for my team. So you have to ask a follow-up if you want to know. I'm going to bring Mary Morris.
Yes.
A little bit of a, brown nosing with the moderator. Clayton Lewis and Bonnie John, and you have to ask me why later. So thank you.
Oh, I'm intrigued. All right. Laura, your early work showed how transparency shapes coordination, but today's AI systems are not explainable even to their own creators, right? They're basically a black box. So does transparency still make sense as a goal?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting question, and it's kind of cool to see people are still working on trying to make these systems explainable. So there's a bunch of papers at Kai this year even about this. But in my earlier work, well, first, I think transparency still absolutely matters, but maybe what we mean by it has to shift a little bit. So in my earlier work, we were really looking at transparency, making people more visible to each other, making their work visible to try to enhance coordination, and looking at how that affected learning. And that was sort of interesting, but what's changed with generative AI, particularly an LLM-driven generative AI, is now we have this layer, the model, that can be really opaque. And that doesn't mean transparency stops being useful, but maybe we need to think about not just making the model interpretable, but looking at the system around it and making that more visible to people. So how is it trained? How is it evaluated? Who is involved? It's sort of to Jeff's comments about what's behind these systems and where's the data actually coming from, and where does it tend to fail? What is this impact on people? How is it affecting them? So in some ways, social transparency becomes even more important. because we need to think about the human work behind these systems. So much of it is hidden, but it's incredibly important, and the human impact of these systems is incredibly important. So I don't think we move away from transparency, but maybe we push the boundaries of what we mean by it and really think about what needs to be made visible and to whom.
Niklas, your expertise is in data visualization, and many people might argue that generative AI tools can now create very compelling data visualizations. So how do you think this changes the role of data visualization researchers?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and it echoes, my thoughts echo some of the sentiments I've heard. I mean, some years ago, 10 years perhaps, I went to a panel called The Death of Scientific Visualization, ? And that entire panel, it was at the VIS conference, was essentially 4 dudes reassuring each other that, oh, the field is not dying. And, you know, to some sense, like, are we VIS or the HCI community? Are we the orchestra playing in the Titanic as it's sinking? I don't think so. But of course, Gen AI is an existential threat to some degree to some parts. Like this last few months, we had a survey where we asked researchers and practitioners, what do you feel about Gen AI and its impact? And we got very mixed answers. Some were doomsayers, some were very positive. And I would say, I mean, the ultimate goal, like data visualization people don't have a real dog in this fight. We ultimately want people to understand data, not necessarily create visualizations. People don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to create a bar chart. They want to understand their data, right? So to some degree, that's okay. And in my work, we've said, okay, if a blind or low vision person wants to understand data, we will not use visualizations. We will use tactile displays. We'll use sonification. So in a way, that's part of the answer. Another answer, I think, is we've gone from hand-drawn charts to charts that are drawn through pixels to my higher and higher level toolkits. So in some sense, it's all about tools lifting the abstraction level so that we can reason about more interesting questions. And I just think that Gen AI relieves us from some of the mechanics of building visualizations so that we can free ourselves to some of the higher level thinking, including making sure that the answers that we're getting are correct. But I would say a slight caution here is that as a person who teaches data visualization, I do see the impact of coding agents, for example, that can create immense polish. Products can look really good, like the projects the students do, but there's a risk because a lot of the data design choices were not correct. Maybe that's fixed in post-training at some point, maybe not, but it just means that a lot of students are just taking these things and they're going off and creating very polished solutions that don't solve the problem. So I think we're still not the orchestra playing on the Titanic. I still think we have a strong role to play in the future.
Thank you. And before we hand things over to the audience, last question that is something that's actually been on my mind a lot lately, the topic of replication in HCI. So Joe, I wanted to hear what you think is the value or role of replication studies in our field, and how can we incentivize more replication? Have you ever done a replication study yourself? And how confident do you feel about the replicability of your own body of work?
So that's a very good set of questions. I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but it may happen anyway. In a lot of areas, other scientific disciplines, we often see that a study will be run and some new finding will be disseminated, and then other people will replicate that experiment to see if indeed this finding, has some truth or some, clarity. And we don't seem to do that a lot in HCI. Like at the CHI conference, novelty is really kind of the most important thing. But if you take a look at any user study that anybody does with, a small group of people, and Maybe you're trying to determine if your technique is better than someone else's. And let's say that you do. It would be nice to know if someone else replicated your study, would they get the same result? And we just don't see that happening a lot. And the more interesting problem is what happens if you do it and it doesn't come out the same? Because then there's all different types of reasons that it could be the case. And you asked me, have I ever done a replication study? And the answer is yes. I did it a number of years ago. And I built on 2 different studies. It was a non-isomorphic 3D rotation study where we were just doing a simple docking task, but different scales in the CD ratios. And I got different results than the people that I based the studies on. But it wasn't a big surprise. We were using different hardware. It was different technology at the time. Those studies had been done years before. So it made sense, And then I decided to do another replication study on my study, and I got different results. And so that begs the question is, am I doing the study correctly? Right? What's going on? And it turned out that in this particular instance, the location of the object to be docked was different in terms of how close it was to you, and this was done in a virtual environment. So that simple scaling factor made the change. And so if we wanted to try to do replication studies, seriously, it's going to be really important for people to be able to disclose exactly everything that they did in order to do that study so someone else could go ahead and replicate it. And then if the replication comes out to be the same, then okay, great. Then maybe the concept, the design guideline is true. But if it's not, then what are you left with? And then you start getting into arguments. Well, I think my study was right. No, my study's right. And you're going to go back and forth. And if there was a way that that you could sort of provide a rebuttal to someone who did a study for you, did a different study, then at least you could open up a dialogue as to why these studies came out differently. And I think it would be nice, at some point to have a venue to support that. I don't know if CHI is the right venue, but, and I know Virtual Reality Software and Technology Conference, they do have a replication track, so I know that it's starting to happen, but I think it needs to happen more, because I think it's important to see if these user studies actually hold water.
Thank you. So while we're getting maybe the lights turned up a little, and if folks have their own questions for the panel, if you want to put hands up, the student volunteers will come with the mics. And while we're getting that in place with the lights and the hands and the student volunteers, maybe Jeff can do us the favor of telling us what hypothetical HCI battle is he fighting with the dream team of Bigham, Morris, John, and Lewis?
I didn't know that you was really going to have to answer that. Okay, so I think the battle, the battle's a little mysterious, but I think the battle is really this existential question of what does HCI mean, and is it valuable, and how do we convince folks, right? And so what I was thinking about with first Mary, I think very few people have been as clear-eyed as Mary and as willing to push the HCI community to acknowledge the very real advances in AI as Mary has been over the last 3 years. I think some of us, myself included, got distracted with AGI. That's not even a well-defined concept, but it does mean something, and Mary has pushed us there. Second, I've never met anyone as curious or as supportive as Clayton Lewis, and I think that we're going to need that kind of going forward, and I think he is a wealth of knowledge about a wide variety of different fields, and so I thought he would, in case the battle took a turn I didn't expect, I thought he'd be really well prepared. And then I was thinking, ultimately, despite whatever we actually do, we need somebody who's just really good at designing and thinking about what user interfaces are going to actually work for people. And so there's a number of people you could choose from the SIGCHI Academy that could serve that role, but obviously home field advantage, Bonnie John being at least formally associated with Carnegie Mellon, and also just being really amazing at this kind of area in her own right. So that was my reasons.
Nice. I would always have Jake Wobrock on whatever hypothetical SIGCHI Academy battle team, because he's the tallest person in the SIGCHI Academy, and I feel like that's just good for any kind of battle. So, all right. Has the student volunteer brought someone a microphone yet? Great. Please introduce yourself and maybe say what person or people on the panel you're directing your question to. If it's going to be something for all 11 people, do it in the form of a poll where people can raise their hands so that it doesn't take like 20 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much for the panel. To be honest, this has been one of the best panels I've ever attended. Thank you, Mary, for such a wonderful moderation. So you brought a lot of foods for thought, a lot of really interesting directions to think about. I wonder if we take 5 to 10 years ahead, what problems do you want to see addressed that you really wanted to tackle, but it wasn't the time or you haven't done it already? And I don't know whom, but like maybe one or two can volunteer to answer.
Despite all of us thinking a lot about ubiquitous computing and sensing and being on board human bodies, I still feel, so there was this artist, David Rokeby, who did this early motion detection system called the Very Nervous System, and he tells a story about how when he first demoed it, it was broken and it didn't work, and it was like working right before he demoed it. So he went back and looked at videos of himself playing with it, and he realized it had slowly trained him to move in really weird ways because he was such a plastic thing as a human that he was legible to it because it had trained him. And I really feel like we have this trend of disembodiedness that we've accidentally backed ourselves into, and also a weird kind of persistent synchrony of our rhythms with machine rhythms and an acceleration and a kind of unhealthy decoupling from one another. And I don't feel we did that on purpose as HCI people, and I know we have a lot of people thinking about embodiment, but I honestly think this is one of the pressing challenges of our time, is to fight against the machine barriers like bandwidth makes you want to put things on the client side and have things be asynchronous, all of these tendencies, and I think Durish writes about this in his book, certain things about how computation works are really antithetical to being embodied and being in co-rhythm with others, and I think this is a huge, and sensing our world, I think we have to keep pushing on this, and this is really important.
Did anyone else want to respond?
I want to second that, the second part of your answer about kind of the disenfranchisation or something of us becoming more disconnected, maybe because of AI mediating a lot of our work. So there's this opportunity that, or our possibility that we are relying on outputs and that just from systems that we don't understand, we're connecting less with other human beings in ways that are going to have impacts we're not really looking at enough yet. So just looking at the impact of these technologies on collaboration, really, and our human social fabric, we need to look at that.
Thank you. Next question. By the way, I can't see anything because of the way the lighting is, so when I say next question, whoever has the microphone, just go. Like, I can't physically see you or look directly at you.
Hi, I'm Save Savage from Northeastern University. So this is a question for any panelist that wants to take it. I don't know if you can actually discuss a little bit more about your failures and also how you overcame them, like the biggest challenges that you faced in your HCI career, because probably a lot of us can learn from them. Thank you. And fantastic panel. Thank you, Mary, for the great moderation.
So my very first grant when I was first year PhD student was to the Swedish Research Council, and it was about gesture typing. And basically the panel said nobody would ever change the way they type. And it was a complete failure because it was actually quite important at the time, but funny in hindsight. I have it printed out. but it taught me a very important thing, which I think was a Princeton computer science professor who did this. He basically printed out all his rejections on his website, right? And I think a lot of people who are starting out, they don't really know this, but there is a lot of failure to success, right? Perseverance is really critical.
I would just add that there's a bit of a survivor bias because you're looking at the bombers that made it home who are sitting here. So it's a bit difficult for, I think, anyone knows that chance plays a big role. And it's very difficult, I think, sometimes to trace these.
Yeah, this is super important. I mean, my career is littered with projects that I did, and people literally turned to me from kind of managers and more senior people telling me, please stop doing this stupid project. Many of them became successful later. So it's hard to be kind of confidently contrarian at the moment. Now, I also want to say one other thing. One of my new fascinations is to go into the archives. These are the public archives of people that I've admired their careers. Many of them have passed or their archives are available. And I look for their rejected grants. I am interested in the things that they were not allowed to do or the ideas they had. And it's for another time, but they were way ahead of their time. And you can just read these grant reviews and go, oh, you missed it, reviewers, because that's the world we live in now. You could have had this research early. So failure, important.
Thank you. All right, next question.
Hi, this is Liz Gerber from Northwestern. This is a question for Eric Paulos. You invited us to be punk. I'm over here on the left.
Oh, where are you?
Over here. You invited us to be punk, and so because I know you're so good at improvisation, I would like to invite you to call out a few of your colleagues on the panel. What would it look like for their research to go punk? So I'd like you to specifically call out 3 to 4 people on the panel and tell them what would it mean for them to go punk. You're welcome to start with Jeff, Laura, Darren, Niklas. We just want some concrete examples. And if you need to move your body, move around, you can do that.
This is because I didn't go last year when you were here to tease you and get you to do some performative aspect. Well, I'm not sure if I'm gonna actually, I want to clarify this punk thing because I think Per had a good comment that it's not punk for being a punk. There's obviously a style and a meaning, and it's almost by not being punk, you're punk. So I think everybody gets that. So I think kind of I'm a little tongue-in-cheek in trying to call that out, but I want people to think about, how they're edgy. I think everybody here has punk elements. I don't think you get to this stage in your career without some level of really like pushing something so novel and so unusual. And I've admired a lot of the work from everyone on this panel. I'm like, I can't believe I'm up here. So I don't know. I'm like very honored. I'm not going to call it individual people. I'm not going to do a dance or performance, but maybe at the after party. I don't know about that.
All right, I'm going to save Eric by going to the next question.
Ben Schneiderman, University of Maryland. Thank you all for an interesting discussion and Mary for her challenging questions. I'd like to turn from the dark side of people's failures and their dismal view to ask you to celebrate. What are the things that you see as heroic about the CHI community? It's, after all, Doug Engelbart was our first CHI Academy recipient. We've done pretty well. 6 billion people around the world use the products of the work from these communities. And the community itself has flourished to its largest conference ever. We're doing pretty well. Yeah, we always have failures. We all have had failures. But I would like you to reflect on your successes and what's gone well and what you think we need to continue doing. Thank you.
I have one, which is, I think it's really amazing that we keep managing to bring more and more people along as these services that are vital to everyday life get more and more digital, that we did manage to come up with multi-touch smartphones and tablets so that everyday people don't have to deal with file systems and computation. So I think it's pretty incredible that we've equipped so much of humanity with these tools, and they're capable of using them.
I will not claim this myself, but reflecting from 2026 back and the earlier 2000s when I started on the state of accessible computing, we have obviously not solved all the problems, but it is dramatically better. There are technologies in everyone's pocket that can support a wide variety of different abilities, ways of using computers that we just didn't have back then. And so I think that's a huge success. Again, not me, obviously, and not even just this community, but the broader sense of it. I think it's a tremendous success.
And I would just, I think along similar lines, just thinking about kind of the diversity representation, if you think about our opening plenary and, all the different kind of countries and the communities that are kind of like involved in the field, I think that's been a massive success for us. We still have a ways to go, but it's something that I think has really kind of like developed and strengthened over time. And I also think like taking that into consideration in the design and the development of technologies is something that has really sort of moved forward in the last few years that I'm personally quite proud of from this community.
And I want to celebrate community as well. My very first Chi, I was a student volunteer, didn't know a single person here. And over the years have seen researchers come through, often starting as student volunteers or sitting on a committee or meeting them in a workshop, and just seeing the evolution of the community that we have built and the breadth that's been mentioned here. Every year I'm excited to see the new work that comes out and meet the new people that are coming to the community.
I love this optimism, and this is like so joyous, so thank you. You know this, but I get so much pleasure out of students that come into my classroom or I encounter, and they are excited about technology, and they see something, and I go, that was something worked on for decades by HCI practitioners. That was developed over years of iteration, and sort of opening their eyes that it wasn't just one company or one keynote or one person standing in front of an audience showing something off at a big demo, that there's depth to all of this. And yeah, you mentioned, Doug Engelbart. He's on my team, by the way. On my, I got Doug, I got Hiroshi Ishii, I got Patty Mays. That's Scott.
Oh, by the way, Ben Schneiderman, you're on my team too. And Brad, and everyone else.
All right, who's got our next question? Remember, I can't see you, so if you have the mic, just start talking.
So thank you for great discussions. I'm Marianne Grace, Aarhus University. I just want to compliment all the optimism here with a little bit of pessimism and ask the panel of how we as a community are dealing with this, right? As of today, we're witnessing a lot of different societal and planetary crises. Are we doing enough as a research community for addressing these? I mean, interactive technologies have a huge role in actually also shaping some of these, but perhaps also in addressing some of these.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm talking too much, but that's why I got really upset about climate change, and I forget who it was, but was like, do what you know how to do and apply it to the problem. And what I realized is that a lot of the problem is psychological and social. It's not technical. It's like we've been known for a long time what to do, but people freak out, put their heads in the sand, and they don't actually work on stuff. And they sure can't figure out how to do it at a giant scale, right? So my lab has been working on climate resilience and playfulness, because what we realize is play keeps people from freaking out. They start playing a game, and then you can give them a lot of information that they need to figure out how to be active, right? So that's just one example. I think we can throw ourselves into any one of these problems, and I know many of my colleagues are doing the same.
I can have a go at it also. I think in the beginning, this widespread use of technology has been a great success, but now it has been so widespread that there are also some threats against it. We are losing trust in the systems we are using, because there's a lot of people doing cyber attacks, and we see fake news everywhere. So I think we need to have a focus on how to create trust in the user interfaces we actually develop. And it's, of course, more than just a user interface problem. It's the entire system, also authenticating who is behind the threats and so forth. But I think we've created a huge success with ubiquitous systems all over, but now it's coming back at us.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, thank you so much for the wonderful panel. My name's Eugenia Rowe. One question that I have for everyone, anyone can answer, is what keeps your, not your biological pulse, but what keeps your pulse as a researcher, scholar, as an educator going? What drives you? What motivates you? If you can distill it down to a set of phrases or a mantra or something, it'd be really interesting to know. Thank you.
So it's a great question, and I've reflected on it a bit actually at older age. And when I was young, it was just creating new stuff, if I'm going to be honest. As you get slightly older, you want to see your students do well, because you have PhD students and postdocs, and it means a lot to see them go forward. I think at this stage, it really is like true impact, right? Like something transformative, something that is actually lasting. It's very, grandiose in some sense, but that is what is, in all honesty, driving me.
For me, and I think this is, everyone on the stage probably thinks the same thing, but surrounding yourself by amazing colleagues really drives me. Not only my faculty colleagues, but students as well. I think they're the greatest source of kind of inspiration and bringing new ideas. And when you're going out to get a job, the paycheck doesn't really matter. It's really who you're going to spend a lot of hours in the lab with. So I think amazing colleagues, and a couple of them are on the stage, really is what fires me up and makes me think big questions.
I think one of the things that having the ability to kind of like look back over time, there's a lot of ups and downs here, but over time, recognizing that, even when things seem a little dire or they're not going to work out great, is you have these sort of great moments that happen, and often it's through, work with students or colleagues, as Chris was saying. And I think just sort of knowing that and knowing that that's on the horizon at some point is actually something that sort of just keeps me very excited, because you never quite know when the next kind of discovery or when the next kind of like exploration is going to really kind of catch you, and it does. It repeats over time. It's not consistent. It's not like it's going to happen every month or every year even. But just having the privilege of looking back over time and recognizing that is a pattern and it's going to continue, I think gives me a lot of promise.
Great. Do we have another question from the audience?
Yes. Hi, it's here. So my name is Xin Lei, and I currently work for Huawei. I have an HCM team in here, and I used to be a PhD student at Generating Motors Lab, so when I entered this room, I heard my supervisor got killed, and I was like, oh my God. So I just want to ask two questions that I usually got asked when I entered the industry, and I'm just curious about your answers. So first is, like, how do you define like the boundary of HCI researchers? And how is it different from other kind of like researchers in the technical field, for example? And the second question is like, similarly, like how do you think it's unique about HCI people compared to other kind of roles? For example, like UX researchers or engineers or some other researchers, for example, for CV stuff or like speech recognition or so forth. Like I just want to hear the answers about those.
I think I can answer the second one. The thing that sort of drives me or drove me, still does, with HCI research is the fact that it's so multidisciplinary. In order to do good work in HCI, you've got to understand lots of different things like, computer science, psychology, engineering, mathematics. They all play a role or can play a role in what you're doing, and it really makes the research that you do very, very interesting, because you have the ability to explore all these different areas that you may not have otherwise.
I was just going to reflect on, at Microsoft Research in my team we have there's 26 of us, and it's often challenging to come up with like a unifying theme across the group. But the one thing that I consistently find for pretty much all the work we do is the fact that we care about humans. So it's very human-centered. We think first about the human and then about the technology or the enabling aspects later. And so very sort of human-centric, I think, is what's special about us.
Just add that I think the field has really no bounds. I mean, I think if it has humans and computers and they're interacting, very broadly speaking, it's HCI. And I think that encompasses actually most of the disciplines in computer science. So I think we should kind of go eat computer science, broadly speaking. A lot of them, who are they making all these technologies for if not for humans? So it's HCI. The thing that really irks me, right, when you get a Chi review is when someone says, this is not Chi, or this is not WIST, or pick your community of choice. And that always irks me because I think the reason why Chi has been so successful and why it's growing at an unbelievable rate, I think it's the second largest technical program now in the ACM of all the conferences that ACM runs. That's explosive, incredible, growth. And I think it's because we have a big tent kind of view of it. There's, if it's weird, if it's punky, it's cool. We want to see cool ideas. We are a field that lives on novelty and compelling experiments and interesting methods. And I really think we should very loosely define HCI and really don't try to establish walls. I think we want to dissolve the walls.
Oh, I had a punk idea that ties into that, which I was thinking of the orcas destroying the rudders on ships in the Mediterranean. I was thinking I would really like to design more destructive technologies for like apex predators and other animals that could actually take on humans in a fight, and like see how far that could go to kind of correct some human behavior when we think about climate. So there's a punk idea for one of you students. If you want to hang out in the Mediterranean in a boat and study that, I'll gladly join you.
I just want to say this. I think the panel's already telling you this, but these boundaries, that is a problem. We don't want those boundaries. In fact, to be kind of creative in these new frontiers, that's a feature, not a bug, that we don't have this really rigidly defined boundary.
Great. So I think we have time for one last question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everyone, we'll start from Eric and go reverse in the alphabet. You get one sentence of advice you would give to a graduate student. So it can be about what to study, how to get a job, how to take advantage of the Chi community, just like general life advice. Your one sentence of grad student advice. Up the row. Go, Eric.
With 7 seconds to think about it. Okay. I think I got to say, be a punk and get into trouble and change us.
So my PhD advisor, Andy Van Dam, told me getting a PhD isn't about what you know, it's about how much bullshit you can put up with. And I think it's pretty true. So if you're getting a PhD and you're having trouble, just don't give up. Never give up.
Persevere and be courageous.
Notice the process as it unfolds, and that includes noticing what methods you like, noticing who you enjoy working with, and let your moment-to-moment experience and your conscious awareness of that shape your career as much as any other goal you're aiming for.
Find what you're passionate about and surround yourself with amazing people.
Yeah, I was going to say passion. I think if you're passionate about something, you'll do good at it. It'll be amazing work.
I would give the advice that when you get crazy visionary ideas, you should try to test them in real use scenarios before you go too far down the road.
Maybe I would say be creative and trust in yourself and invest in yourself.
Don't be afraid to fail, embrace naps, and don't follow our advice.
Wear sunscreen.
Don't follow our advice. I'd say rejection is not a statement about your quality or the quality of the work. It's an opportunity to kind of enhance the work, and so don't give up from rejection. Also, introduce yourself to 5 new people at this conference, especially senior people. We don't bite.
Start thinking now about how you would summarize the advice you would like to receive, had received, in one sentence, so you're not stuck on a panel like this without something meaningful to say, and then do that thing.
Very good. Thank you and congratulations to the SIGCHI Academy inductees. All right. Enjoy Barcelona, everyone.